But hello, everyone. Seeing some great faces that I've known for decades and some more recently. I'm Kimberly Charles from Charles Communications and a proud and honored marketing agency on behalf of Domaine Carneros. Elaine and I, Eileen, what did I say?
She's somebody else.
Funny. We know each other for 30 years.
That's a different winemaker, yes.
Yeah, at least we got married. Sorry about that, Eileen. Eileen and I have known each other since 1987 when I was at Cowgirl in New York and the chateau was getting built. And I've had the great privilege and honor to work with her all those decades and on and off with different callings. But nothing makes me happier than to salute the illustrious career of Eileen and to commend and acknowledge all of her efforts, not just for the winery, but for our industry. In addition, in the military, I'm a Navy brat. I have my dad's flag from the Naval Academy in a little glass case over there. And we have something called a hail and farewell when there's a change of command. And so we thought today would be a wonderful day to say, hail to Remy Cohen, the brand new CEO of Domaine Carneros as of harvest, August 3rd. And a fond farewell to Eileen, who is not going far, still helping out with the blends and all sorts of undertakings on behalf of the property. So two dynamic women, a continuation of female leadership at the winery, a wonderful way to sort of greet the new times that we're in. And so I am pleased to present this, and Kristen Rink is here as well from Charles Communications. Let us know if you need anything during that by just popping a question in the chat. I was just going to say too that for the first half hour, Eileen and Remy will sort of be walking us through their stories and through the wines. And so, think about some questions. Feel free to pop them in the chat too, and we'll make it happen. I call it beautiful chaos. So we'll make sure that happens. All right, thank you.
Just an aside, I was retiring at about the same time that 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐿 was retiring, and his daughter became the president. So there's a little triumvirate now in the Taittinger group between me, Remy, and Italy. Can't hear you.
Eileen, you're very faint.
Am I louder now?
No.
No. Okay, am I better now?
Eileen, I would just go ahead and speak loudly, a little loudly, more loudly than you're accustomed, if you don't mind.
We are getting it adjusted, but in the meantime, so the question at the moment is, or should I just start and see if people can hear me?
That's a little better.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. So this is a great deal of fun for me. To see people again that I've seen over the years and chatted with, not maybe often enough. It is a big country, but I've really enjoyed meeting so many of you over the years, and sometimes multiple times. And it was really very difficult for me to make the choice to retire. I've had a great run here. I tasted my first champagne when I was 8 years old. Back then, parents were not arrested for letting their kids have wine. When you were with your parent, it was okay to drink something. But I tasted my first champagne at the age of 8, and from then, through some circuitous routes, I found my way to the sparkling business in the United States, and that was really, I was amazed that I could do that, from a little girl in New Jersey where there was no way to learn about wine. You might have been an Italian son of a winemaker in upstate New York. And I didn't qualify for any of that. But little by little, I found my way on this magic carpet that took me to Napa, and started in 1978 and at Chandon as a part-time tour guide, and then as a lab tech for Harvest. They said it would be only 6 weeks, and I left 6 years later. But it was a great opportunity to learn the technical aspects of making method champenoise. And subsequently, when I was hired by the Ferrers to build Gloria Ferrer, I had 3 years to create whatever I wanted as far as sparkling wine. They used very different grape varieties. And so I was on my own. And the same thing with the Taittingers. Early on, they tasted wines that I had produced. We talked about style. And there's great confidence between us. I think they felt early on that I understood what Taittinger was producing, what they wanted to do, which was a much more elegant style, not a heavy style. And that's what appealed to me, that sort of very not light is not the right term, but an elegant style. And as Taittinger has that poster of Grace Kelly, very elegant woman, I always like to think of Domaine Carneros as Audrey Hepburn in the little black dress, kicky, fun with a social conscience, but you look at her and everything's in place, that she's a understated elegance, and that's what I see Domaine Carneros is. Can you hear me at this point? You can. Okay, good. So it was a difficult choice to not say goodbye to Domaine Carneros. I live in Napa, and I'm sure I will be here, if nothing else, to sit out on the terrace and drink some pink bubbles overlooking the vines of Carneros. But I'm not going anywhere too far, but I am delighted that we found Remy, and Remy has experiences that I don't have. Remy has far more knowledge of vineyards than I have, and I think that that's a wonderful attribute, a wonderful skill that I was okay, but I wasn't great at it. And she also has a great public relations sense about her. She's very interested in wines. We've been tasting together on our annual blending cuvee. We blend our sparkling cuvées starting usually in early September or mid-September, and it usually goes to the middle of December. And Remy's been sitting in on all of those tastings, and she's, I wonder what that will be like for someone who's a still wine producer, and it took her about 2 or 3 days to catch on. So I think she's just the right person for us. So, and I am continuing as a consultant for sparkling wine, but Zach Miller, who I have worked with him for 10 years. And so he's very familiar with our style, and we'll continue to work together for a while. One of the things that's different about Domaine Carneros, and that I saw early on in the sparkling wine business, that particularly the French-owned houses would have someone come over from France and to do their blends. And they'd usually come over for a week or two to create their blends, and then they'd go back. By the time I was hired at Domaine Carneros, I had 10 years of experience, and that's not what happened. I would make the blends and then send them to Taittinger to see if they liked them or not, and they always did. But it's a very different approach. The other thing that's been different about Domaine Carneros, quite different about Domaine Carneros, is that we haven't had turnover of winemakers. And why is that important? If you think about sparkling wine, we don't release a sparkling wine less than 4 years from harvest. So it takes a long time to understand that what you put in the bottle is not what comes out 4 years later, or 8 years later, or 10 years later, that it's morphed enormously. And it takes really a long time to understand what you put into the bottle and how that relates to what the final wine is. Because when you make a still wine, you see it age over maybe 9 months or 18 months, if it's a red wine in barrel, or 2 years, but you taste it as you go along. We create a cuvee, we put it in the bottle about 4 months after harvest, and what comes out of the bottle 4 years later will have bubbles in it. It'll have slightly more acidity from the CO2. It will have, of course, age. It will have a dosage. And so there are all these components that you have to make allowance for, and it takes so long to learn what you start with, how do you get the final results that you want. So that's been really a challenge for me and for other sparkling winemakers. But having been here all this time, I've acquired, certainly, or have a house palate. And so working with other people, such as our Pinot Noir winemaker, who also works with us on the sparkling, and Zach, we have worked together for a decade in both cases. And so there's time to learn the system, how to maintain the Domaine Carneros style over time. Would you like to ask any questions around this?
Well, I think what we'll do is maybe have Remy check in, and then Eileen, as we get to the wines, I'm sure there'll be some questions there. There was one from Jeff Kralik about how has Domaine Carneros remained a part of 𝐷𝐸 when other French-owned California houses have changed hands?
Yes, and that does change things very substantially. 𝐷𝐸 was, of course, a relatively small sparkling or champagne house. And there was a time 𝐷𝐸 was purchased. 𝐷𝐸 had a vast empire, banking interests, hotels from the Creon down to $89 a night, a vast array of hotels. They owned Baccarat. They owned a perfume company, Annick Goutal. There's a vast number of interests that they had. I was in Claude 𝐷𝐸's office one day, and he picked up the phone, and someone from Sabina Airlines wanted to know if Claude 𝐷𝐸 would like to buy the airline. I've never experienced that. Someone calls you up and said, would you like to buy an airline? But it was a huge empire with a lot of family members, about 50 family members who were heirs. And in between 2004 and 2008, they divested themselves of virtually all of their elements, their investments, and only 2 stayed in the family, a different branch of the family. And what they held was, or buyback was, 𝐷𝐸 and then Domaine Carneros. They bought just the 2, and they're very clear that they wanted Domaine Carneros back with them. They did own several other sparkling houses in the Loire Valley, but those went off someplace else. And it's the family's very involved. Pierre-Emmanuel 𝐷𝐸, who's been the CEO for since 2008, and his son is in charge of marketing the wines, and his daughter is the president of Champagne 𝐷𝐸. So it's a family, and I think that they view me and Domaine Carneros as part of their family as well. So they can't really fire me if I'm family, I think.
Well, I'll just say a few words. First of all, thank you all so much for joining us. Obviously, we wish we could do this in person, but it's really a pleasure to see all your lovely faces. I'm familiar with many of you, and I look forward to getting to know those of you that I don't already know. But for those of you who do know me, probably know that I actually loved my job at Cliff Lady and was not really looking for another opportunity. But when I was first approached about this position, I knew it was the perfect fit for me, and I couldn't have been more excited. I started my career in Carneros, fell in love with the region. I worked at Bouchain and Sainsbury and Maryvale, and mainly focusing in the vineyards and moving into operations and general management later in my career. But what was such a great fit for me was Domaine Carneros and 𝐼lene's commitment to the Carneros region, and also the commitment to estate grown vineyards. So my background as a viticulturist, that's really important to me. And 2020 marks the first year in a while of the estate. All of the wines are going to be estate grown. So we're really excited about that. And that's really meaningful to me, as well as to 𝐼lene. And that was a goal for her to achieve before her retirement, and just completed an acquisition and a replanting of a vineyard on Las Amigas Road. So we're pretty excited about that. And we've got 20 clones of Pinot and all heritage selections and 20 selections of Chardonnay. And any of you guys who want to geek out with me on vineyards, I'm here for that. But what was really, what I didn't know about Domaine Carneros, and when I first started talking with 𝐼lene, when we were discussing this position, was how progressive the winery was on two other fronts that are very meaningful to me. And one of them is the award-winning sustainability program here. So everything from having the largest commercial solar array installed at the time in 2003, and now we have a commitment to build another microgrid. So expand upon this and upgrade it so it'll be, we'll operate as an island in these power outages that have become more and more common, unfortunately, in our area. But also our composting, recycling, reuse. Over 90% of the solid waste is diverted away from the landfills. All the water comes from the site and gets reused on the site. There's so many, just amazing things about the sustainability and the progressive nature of that I was really excited about, and excited to share with all of you guys. And then the other thing, which is maybe a little less sexy than sustainability, is 𝐼lene is a really progressive management and very participative management style here. So they do open book management, and we have an employee development and training program that really helps advance people in their careers. And those two things from a management perspective are really exciting for me. But what's also been great is that joining the team here, what I really see from the team here is how much they love and appreciate 𝐼lene and everything that she's built, and this incredible this incredible foundation, not only these delicious wines and this beautiful facility, but this amazing group of people. And I love to see how much they love her, but also they've been really amazingly welcoming to me. So I'm so glad for that. And 𝐼lene is still working with us, and I hope that we get to keep you as long as possible, 𝐼lene. So, and I think everyone here feels the same way. So there'll be a lot of continuity. 𝐼lene mentioned that I've been blending with them, and I've just been loving learning the art of sparkling wine from her and having her as a soundboard. And I just look forward to being able to build upon this amazing foundation that you created, 𝐼lene. And enough about that, though. We can come back to that later. Let's drink some wine. Maybe you can lead us through the 1992 𝐿eRêve, which was the first vintage. So
it was. So when I was first hired, thank you, Remy. When I was first hired, Claude Taittinger called me right after the first harvest. The winery was not built, but he called and said, 𝐼lene, we have the finest Blanc de Blanc in Champagne, and we'd like you to have America's finest Blanc de Blanc. And there I was in a construction trailer with a dirt guy on one side and the electrical engineer on the other side. And I almost felt like saying, why don't you call me back in about 3 years? But we started to think about that. In '88, we made a prototype of the 𝐿eRêve, and then continued to do that when Claude Taittinger tasted the base wine, the wines that we had just made from the new harvest of '91 and sent to France. And he called me back almost immediately, and he said, if the wines from 92 are as good as the 91 wines, we'll have our very first super cuvee. And that was, of course, the 92 met with his approbation, and we did bottle it. He also was very excited about creating a special bottle with the double ram's head for Carneros, the little cartouche, and that we've used ever since then. So the creation of the first 𝐿'𝐵, I hadn't made a Blanc de Blanc other than the experiments we had at Domaine Carneros from '88. So this was something of a challenge to create something that would be a great cuvee and that would age for a long time. And when we taste this wine now, and it is 20 years old, and I'd like to hear your impression of it, coming back to it. It's got that lemony, toasty kind of nose to it. Mm-hmm. I often think of French toast without the maple syrup. And it's just got this maybe a little eggy thing in the background, but it's got and a honeysuckle kind of note to it. And it's really full in the body too. It was a very early season, 92. We had bud break early, and it was a very mild summer and a small crop. So it was really a great place to start with this wine. Hopefully you can see the tininess of the bubbles, and that's been a hallmark of all of our sparkling wines, little tiny bubbles. And I believe that comes from a proprietary yeast that I found along the way. So, have you tried it? What do you think? Give me a little feedback here.
I'm going to jump in the deep end of the pool and say the first aromatic hit I got was, if you can believe it, like a yellow curry, like this beautiful, like turmeric, yellow curry, and then all these other layers underneath, like crystallized ginger, creme brulee, orange blossom. It's just really beautiful.
I think the French toast and the creme brulee, that little toastiness of a little bit of the egg in it, but I don't quite get the turmeric, but I often get ginger in the 𝐿'𝐵, that it seems to be a compliment to the wine. So this wine is a little unusual. When I started in my early days, not at Domaine Carneros, but I did see Pinot Blanc and found that it was a nice blending wine. We're 98% Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but we do try occasionally other varieties. And we grew a little bit of Pinot Blanc at the time, and this wine actually is 85% Chardonnay, but it's 15% Pinot Blanc. We've subsequently taken it out, and it was hard for me to give it up, because when I was going through the harvest, checking the tanks, the Pinot Blanc always smelled like peach pie baking. So, but we did find some other clones that we felt were more suitable for the 𝐿'𝐵 cuvee. So this was the experiment. This was the very first of the 𝐿'𝐵s. And Kimberly has told you that we've worked together for a very long time in various places. But the name 𝐿'𝐵 came about. I was one Sunday morning with the New York Times and my husband, and I said, we've got this new wine. What are we going to call it? He said, after some discussion, he came up with Reverie. We double checked, and somebody else had that copyrighted. Is that the right word? And and so we couldn't use that. So then we were down at Rev, and in a meeting with Claude Taittinger and folks at co-brand, someone piped up and said, how about 𝐿'𝐵? And that's how we ended. And there you are. Not only did you promote our wines, Kimberly, but you actually named the 𝐿'𝐵, or gave the final touch to it, 𝐿'𝐵.
So. My deep pleasure to do that. And it is a dreamy wine, I swear. I feel like I'm being wrapped in like a lot of gauze when I drink this wine. There's some questions I'd love to put forward, which have come up. Yes. So Kathy has asked, what do you mean by proprietary yeast that I found along the way?
So because I started in the laboratory, I started as a part-time tour guide, but when I got serious about this or had an opportunity, over the years, I've seen different yeast strains, separating out yeast strains, seeing how they would ferment out. A lot of people have gone to commercial yeast, and there's a wide range of yeast that you can use for the primary fermentation and the secondary fermentation. But the one we use for secondary fermentation, we hold that on slants. It's something that I saw a long time ago doing experiments with, and we continue to use it. To my knowledge, nobody else has anything like it. And it's part of the flavor profile. You don't want, in my opinion, a fine sparkling wine to smell like yeast. Someone said to me once, if you want yeast, why don't you smell soy sauce or the stuff they eat down under, skipping the name of it.
Vegemite.
Yeah, thank you. That's what bottleized yeast really smells like. But it's a clean fermenter, but it does influence the flavor slightly. We've tried other yeast strains over the years, and this one always wins. And it's something that's unique to us.
Jeff Kralik asks, when or how do you decide it's time to late disgorge? Is it a developmental issue or an economic one?
It's a little bit of both. So we're tasting the Rev, we're aging that longer now than we did originally. We've added aging time. When we first released the 92, and it had just been it had been disgorged after 5.5 years, and 6 years we were showing it just at the harvest time. So at this point, we age our wines at least another year, and the wines historically have been ready. I very seldom do I hit a wine and I think it's too young. And we do a late disgorge, and that is a little bit dependent upon when the wine comes around. So the late disgorged got more variable timing than the main release of the yearly release of 𝐸.
There are two other, one comment and one question. Deborah Parker Wong, who wrote a pretty comprehensive vertical tasting notes in Tasting Journal last year, said the first time she tasted the 92 was in October of 2012 for a 15-year vertical on your 25th anniversary, and she said it's even more complex now. Maybe this is more a question for Remy and or Eileen, but a question about, does Domaine Carneros have a reserve wine program?
You mean like a library program?
I believe. Yeah.
We do have a library program, and we do release them on occasion. We don't have vast stocks. I think that's probably one of I was pretty pleased of for myself that we saved wines, that I remember to do that, but I wish I'd saved 2 or 3 times as much. And then now we do save more, but at the time it was so small. The first harvest was just 2,000 cases. So to take 500 bottles out of that was pretty large. So we do hold wines back, and we do hold wines back for release, which is what the 92 is in the glass. We held it back, and so that we can taste it both technically as winemakers, and so other people can see how the wine ages over time.
There's a finer point to Meg's question, Meg Maker in New Hampshire. She said, I was actually wondering if you have reserve wine that adds complexity to the non-vintage brut.
Do we take some part of the
or any reserve wine that you may have to, constitute the brut?
Well, we make late disgorge versions of almost all the wines from the Estate Brut, the Brut Rosé, and the 𝐸 So that's one thing. The 𝐸 is our tête de cuvée. We also make a 𝐸 Rosé. And then in the Pinot Noir world, I think what a lot of people might not be familiar with is the breadth. So we have the Estate Pinot Noir, which is kind of a core and representative of what we do here in Carneros on our estate vineyards, but we also make single vineyards. And we also make single clonal selections as well. So we definitely get a little geeked out on the Pinot Noirs here. So sometime, if any of you have the opportunity to come visit us, we'd love to share some of those small production sort of geeky Pinot Noirs with you.
There's another way to interpret the idea of reserve. Perhaps the question is around, for instance, in Champagne, they keep back a quantity of wine to blend with the other years or future years. And that occurs in Champagne because the weather patterns are very undependable. So if you have a bad year, you hope you have adequate stocks to blend with previous better years. And so that's why they do back blending, is because it's harder in Champagne with the weather cycle to be able to provide the same quality and consistency. And in Champagne, they usually pick out the top vintages for a vintage dated Champagne. In Carneros, I've never seen a problematic vintage. And we've had fires and smoke, for instance, but the sparkling wine has always been in before that. And in all the time that I've been in the wine industry, the 43 years that I've been in the sparkling wine industry, I've only seen rain that really affected a crop. It was a late Chardonnay at Domaine Carneros in 1984. There was rain and there was some mold, and we just, it was bad enough that we just discontinued that. But I haven't, it's not something that normally occurs. We don't normally have serious rains in the Carneros. And in Champagne, they have lots of different climates and problems around that we don't have in Carneros.
Should we move on to the 2012? Actually, it was really funny. The very first wine I tasted with Eileen was the 92. So lucky me. We were trying to decide what to share with all of you and whether or not that 20-year retrospective would be good. And it was 9:30 in the morning, and I just swallowed it. Like, I just drank it. It was so delicious. And I was so out of practice with tasting between COVID and the job switch and everything. I was like, oh my God, hopefully she doesn't think I'm crazy, but it's just so delicious. So
anything could be.
It was the breakfast of champions.
Yep, exactly.
Anything could be forgiven during this period of time. If you need a glass of bubbles at 6:45 in the morning, go right ahead.
I know that's one of the funny COVID lines. It doesn't have to be 5 o'clock somewhere. It's 2020 everywhere. So, Eileen, do you want to share a little bit about the 20 years later, the 2012 in the glass here?
Yes. Are you seeing the little bubbles again, hopefully in your glass as you poured it? The way Domaine Carneros, the proprietary yeast. And
Deborah's asking about whether or not we maintain the yeast strain here. Would you share a little bit about that too?
Well, we keep it on slants, and we have an outside laboratory that manages the slants for us, and they do the starter for us, and then it comes back into the winery, and we're grateful for that we were able to do that, to have it handled by an outside laboratory, because in an early stage it's fairly easy to get a contamination if you're not a serious laboratory. We used to do that in the early days, and we didn't have any problems, but it's less nerve-wracking to have people who are in that business to handle the beginning of the yeast development.
A question from Jeff about how your French is for both of you, and how that plays into, you know, partnering with the 𝐶𝐶 and whether there's a preference to speak French, not a preference, but an understanding that you might know it.
I know enough French to order dinner and get on a train. That's about it. And they've been very kind. They do speak, all the 𝐶𝐶 speak English and speak it well. So they've made it very easy for us. I was surprised when Remy came on board and she referred to the open book management system we have, which is based on the Zingermans out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. If you've never heard of that or looked into it, don't let the graphics dissuade you, but it's absolutely a wonderful system to involve people. But I got on a tangent there.
I'm just going to take a quick moment to share a couple of things, just like a National Public Radio would do. So just a quick little overview for everybody about what we're having. And I know Remy's going to share more about these delicious charcuterie and then the cheese that we're having. So we'll have this, we can send this to you for sure. But I just wanted to let you know that's what's going on tonight. And then I thought you guys would find these pictures very cute. And Jenny Orvino, you unearthed these for the North Bay Business Journal, and I must give appropriate credit, always artistic and journalistic credit. But I look at that picture of Eileen with her hands on her knees. I'm like, does that tell you I'm going to be a CEO or what? I just love it. And taking the saddle with absolutely no terror in your eyes, which I can't say is the same for me. So I thought those were really adorable. And,
well, I wasn't afraid of the horse, but I was afraid of Maine, which was always viciously cold.
Yes.
Which is where that picture was taken, me and Silver.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Would you tell the story behind Julia there? That must have been close to 90 at that point, right?
It was her 90th birthday. And we did, 𝐃𝐨𝐽 asked us to make a special commemorative cuvee for her birthday, 90th birthday. And she didn't want to have her, she'd never commercialized her name, but she said her favorite word was frivolities. And so that is a bottle of frivolities that you're looking at there. And the picture next to it is actually my doing a blending tasting, of course, with a photographer there. But this was the very first year I was at Domaine Carneros. They were taking some photos because I was new to the to 𝐶𝐶 and to make an announcement of my presence.
Yes, and then check this out. If you can't guess the era, you're probably too young. But this is 1980. This is 1990 when the chateau launched. Notice the ratio here with Eileen amongst all the men. But over here, rest in peace, Robert Aldridge. I will say, a fellow Virgo, 9/11 birthday. Really great, savvy business leader and president of co-brand, who is, by the way, on the call with Ann Thomas and one of my mentors in my life. And then Gerard Ivernot, who created the imported portfolio of co-brand and really was an amazing executive vice president. He lives in Jackson, Wyoming. This is 𝐷𝐶𝐻. He was born in 1927 and still kicking. Rest in peace, Philippe Corr, who was his right hand. He was the PDG of 𝐶𝐶, an attorney and a killer sailor and a really lovely man. And Eileen and he worked extremely closely together. And then Pierre-Emmanuel 𝐶𝐶, who has now, I think, ceded the presidency, yes, to his sister. Am I right, Eileen?
No, his daughter.
His daughter. His daughter. Of course, that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Pierre-Emmanuel is a little bit older than that. I arranged to visit Champagne and visit Pierre-Emmanuel 𝐶𝐶. Since I had been with the company so long, I wanted to let him know in person that I was going to be retiring. They asked me to give them a year's notice, and he picked me up to take me to dinner that I'd come out to visit. And I got in the car and he said, "I have wonderful news for you." I said, "Well, what is it?" "I've got some wonderful news for you." He said, "I'm retiring." I said, "Well, as it turns out, I'm retiring too. He said, okay, we'll get a bottle of Comte de Champagne over dinner and celebrate. And that was the beginning of it. That was about 15, 16 months ago. But he's very involved still in Tanger. And of course, I'm still very involved in Domaine Carneros. So I sort of joke about the fact that if I'd known how much work retirement takes, I wouldn't have given up my job.
Do you want to take us through these lovely tasty bits, Remy?
Oh, sure. Well, for those of you who recognize that it was in the cold pack, you have the Mount Tam, which is a perennial favorite and a local company. What's not to love about the Mount Tam? Actually, it describes itself as having a dense, fudgy core and a pudgy cream line. And I thought that was, I was like, what does that mean? But Domaine Carneros has partnered with them for over 10 years, and they have a philosophy of small farm and organic practices. So that's very much in line with our philosophy here. In fact, they started the business to support small dairy farms and get their product into wholesalers, and then got convinced by the Strauss family to start making cheeses. And for the non-dairy folks, we have Miyoko's Creamery vegan cheeses, which is another local company based out of Petaluma. It's a plant-based creamery, and they use milk from nuts and legumes, but use very traditional creamery cultures and cheese making techniques. And so they're quite good. If you didn't get them today because you had the real deal, then come visit us, because we have them here as an alternative on our cheese plates here at the winery. All paired with gluten-free Rain Coast crisps, really delicious crackers. And I'll let Eileen tell you a little bit about the Journeyman meats, because she has a relationship with winemaking and from the legendary 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐷 family, Pete 𝐸𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐷. But we're having their traditional 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵 sec, and then they also created a Parmesan and porcini for us as well.
Yum.
So Pete 𝐸𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐷 and I were both in a CEO roundtable. There were 22 people in that roundtable, and 3 of them were women. And we had a party shortly. The woman who was directing the CEO Roundtable program was moving up to Oregon, and we had a farewell party for her, although we stay in touch with her closely. And I sat next to Pete 𝐸𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐷, and he said, I'm getting into the business of sausage making. And I said, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. He said, oh, well, you might be interested in taste it or something. And we chatted a little bit more. And I told him, I said, I'd get back to him on the volume. And he said, it might take me a while to get up to that level. He was surprised that we, right from the beginning of Domaine Carneros, the very first day we opened our doors in the late spring of '89, we had a ramekin of cheese on people's tables, along with some crackers and just one bottle of wine, one style of wine. It was the classic brut. At that time, it was not even vintage dated. That has been an evolution. But we had in order to pour it, we needed to have, of course, a legal label, but the labels had not been actually produced. The official labels. So we wrapped those bottles in napkins so no one would see what the label looked like, the legal label. And we referred to that time as our diaper days. But little by little, we went from 2 or 3 or 4 more wines. And I became interested particularly in rosé. I've always enjoyed rosé sparkling wines, but I was on a trip to Washington, D.C., and every restaurant, hotel at the time in Washington, D.C. that I was in, they were pouring sparkling rosés, and I was really surprised at that. You usually had to buy a bottle, or it was kind of unusual to have access to it. And every place I went had rosé sparkling by the glass. And in 1994, we, based on that, I knew there was an interest, and so we started to produce a sparkling rosé. It was our very first and named for Madame de Pompadour, who was Louis XV's great paramour. And she was very instrumental in promoting champagnes. She fell in love with them. And probably at that time, because they were mostly red grapes that were in early champagnes, it probably was a pink sparkling wine that she would have enjoyed. So we named it in her honor.
So the ever capricious Jeff Kralik wants to know if Remy has any secret projects up her sleeve, and if so, could you share them? Because you know you've been there for 2 months, so it's about time.
Well, first of all, I don't think there's anything in the plans to do anything that doesn't respect the classic nature of the brand and the traditions that have been built here, but maybe building upon them with a little bit of a fresh perspective. So stay tuned for things like maybe like some more seasonal tasting experiences. So we're already planning one for December, and then there's another, Valentine's Day one in the works. So doing a little bit more seasonal experiences here at the winery is one of the things that we're working on, and just in general, always evaluating how to push the experience. Like Kimberly mentioned, everything was where pleasure was built into all experiences. We really just want people to have the most luxurious and sensual time when they come here, and also to have different experiences when they come here. So that's one of the things. You see the estate Pinot Noir, the labels there, they're beautiful and they're so modern, but I think in a sense we lost a little bit of the classic nature of the brand. So we're going to work on how to bring back some of that sort of iconic brand back onto the Pinot Noir labels. What else is happening? Oh, I think just in general, because I was surprised about the focus on sustainability, I want to make sure that that message gets more infused into our experiences here, as well as just into our messaging in general. And that's something that's, very meaningful to me. So building upon that, sharing that, as well as just more of a focus on the vineyards in terms of our story. That's so incredible. I think we're, one of the grand sparkling houses that is estate driven. And that's something that, we should really share and tell that story. And also the focus on the real true champagne method, not only in terms of the tirage, but also in terms of the aging process. And so, again, I think it's basically building upon what's already here, and just kind of giving it a fresh perspective and maybe more of like an eco, environmental and seasonal perspective, and having that be part of the engagement.
There's also, people often think that for a sparkling wine that the grapes themselves are not so important. It's the method. And what Remy said, we've worked very hard to develop vineyards and we're 100% estate as of this year. Great wines are always wines of a place, and they're always from the owner, as far as I know. And so it's we really made this evolution of always trying to make it better, make it more complete, making sure that we stay ahead of the curve. One of my favorite quotes is, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you're sitting there. And so we're always looking for the next thing to really enhance what we do as far as winemaking. And we do evolve. So the wines, the 92 is not the same as the 12. And there's not only, the 12 won't be in 20 years what the 92 is, even if we could, keep them at the same time because of what we have learned. If you think of Picasso, he had a rose phase and a blue phase and a cubic phase. But I think we're we're always evolving. I don't think we'll ever get to the cubic phase. But we are on the path of maintaining who we are, but enhancing it to make it better, because we know that, we want to make something better. We're always looking for the next way to make it a finer wine, and we look for it. One of the things that happened that was kind of the coup de grace in my tenure at Domaine Carneros I was for 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭 for his millennium party. He had a 5-star hotel, the Creon, and he invited 500 of his closest friends for the millennium party that he was hosting. And for that, he poured the 𝐿𝑝. And of course, that was a great coup. And and I asked him, why did you do that? He said, well, the wine's so good. And the other thing the biggest thing that happened in the last 1,000 years was the discovery, so to speak, of the New World. So he wanted to have a New World wine, but he was very proud of the 𝐿𝑝. And occasionally someone would say, if we knew it was so good, we might have asked you to make something else, but it still stands.
Yes. Lots of beautiful conversation going on, and I wanted to share a few things. One is a comment from Dave McIntyre in DC. You were one of the first winemakers I met when I embarked on this writing adventure so many years ago. I've always appreciated your generosity and your support, and I've always learned something every time we spoke. All the best on your retirement. So thank you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Dave. That was very sweet. Thank you.
Great, we've got a lot, so put your seatbelt on. Catherine Cole up in Portland has asked about Remy's thoughts on demand for high-end sparkling wine in 2021 and beyond. 2020 has obviously been an anomaly.
Well, I think there was just in Shaken Daily News that sparkling wine has grown year over year for over a decade now in terms of consumption. So that's really great news. And I think even what we're seeing with the Nielsen data in the pandemic is that sparkling wine is up. From what I hear from a lot of our partners, some of it is Prosecco focused and the lower end, but you have to start somewhere. So I think some like sparkling wine and champagne are associated with holidays and special celebrations, but that's starting to change a little bit, and that it's becoming part of the norm, that people are seeing its diversity in terms of food pairings and its use across more occasions than just special celebrations. So that's, I think, really promising. I think it's up to us to make people feel comfortable with it, because it is intimidating in terms of the opening and the glassware and all those different things. Wine in general can be intimidating, and then add the sparkling wine elements of opening the bottle and which glassware to choose. And so I think it's just a matter of continuing to educate the public, but I think we're on moving in the right direction in terms of having people recognize its versatility, that it's not just a toast at an occasion, but it does pair well with so many different meals, and it can be used much more versatility than thought before.
I also took the anomaly. Was that because of the smoke that was in the area?
I think it's the COVID pandemic and the 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐢 purchases. And if everybody isn't familiar, you probably are. You're all learned and well-researched people. But Mike Osborne of wine.com talks about how their average months were 300,000 prior to March, and that they have not been below $1 million a month since that time. And the average bottle price is around $33. So lots of interest in wine. A couple of questions here from Mary Orland. Thoughts on how to engage consumers to drink sparkling wine as a daily indulgence and not just celebration for the holidays? Yeah, open question for either lady.
Well, I think one of the wonderful things is that you can buy a glass at so many restaurants. You can get a glass, which sort of inspires you. If you've been served a good glass, and think, well, why wouldn't you? So I think that's one of the things that's happened, that at least in this area, you could almost always get a choice of a couple of sparkling wines, and good ones. So that's, I think, people say, this is good. Why don't we do this more often? It kind of inspires that. I think also the fact that the wineries are open, so people certainly come to visit Domaine Carneros, but all the other sparkling houses that I know of have facilities, and people will often say, we're going to do two still houses. They wouldn't use that terminology, but we're also going to go to a sparkling house. And I think that we're one out of 3 in many cases, or which is a lot. There are probably 500 wineries in Napa Valley, and there's 4 or 5 in Napa sparkling houses. So we get a lot more attention, a lot more visitation. So I think that's played a big part in people not being afraid of good sparkling wine.
We have a question from Francophile and regular Paris traveler, 𝐬𝐝𝐿𝐾, who we all sadly can't get to the continent, but hopefully one day. She said in Champagne, they were sadly throwing out wine due to overstock related to COVID. Is the situation better here? I would think so, but what do you say?
Throwing out like wines that are in the tanks or finished wines. I think it would be hard to throw away finished wines. Perhaps they just were taking a smaller portion of their crop because they didn't have a place to stock the extra bottles. You tirage it usually in the spring, and then you have to find a place to stock the bottles. And I can understand that they wouldn't want to make that investment to bottle the wines. We're not in that situation. Because we have so much visitation, and we have a large wine club, so that we're shipping wine and selling wine from the winery. Yes, sales have gone down overall in the national market, but we sell approximately 50% of what we produce, we sell directly from the winery. So nationally, we're down by about 25% from, or about probably we're down 50% in the national market, maybe not that much. And Remy, how much down are we in the national market?
It's not that bad, because I think, you know, some of the retail is compensating for some of the on-premise, but because we were heavily focused on-premise, but it's really like 15 to 20% depending on which wine. So it could be worse given our on-premise focus. I think a lot of our wine is sold by the glass at restaurants, so that was challenging for everyone to overcome. But I think Meg and Monique and everyone were saying that it's become a little bit more accessible as a daily drinker, with it being lower alcohol. It's also kind of an uplifting wine to have, so people are buying it more frequently in retail and bringing sparkling wine home to enjoy more regularly, which is really great, obviously, for all of us. And you know, we've, as everyone here I'm sure knows, Napa Valley has had some big vintages in recent months, in recent years. But with sparkling wine, as we can see here with the 92, it just gets better with age, and we like to age our sparkling wine for at least 3 years. So I don't think, you know, we're not worried about the slowdown with COVID. We'll figure it out, and that wine will be consumed and it'll be delicious.
And
fried chicken.
It's a take on that. In addition, or another side of that is that while we have limited number of guests because of social distancing, which we are absolutely to the letter of the law, but people are buying more. People may not be going out as much, but they want to have a good bottle at home. And so even though we're seeing fewer people because of the distancing requirements, which I'm in favor of, but you're going to be drinking it at home. You create the little celebrations in other ways. And so we've seen a big change that way. And our club members are trying to help us out too by buying. They know that sales are down. So we're in pretty darn good shape overall this year.
I wanted to just say that there's all sorts of fun food pairings flying around on the chat. You know, I really appreciate everybody's attention and time. And I think we have shared so much with you. And I would love if anybody would like to, you know, share anything in particular, not just through me reading your chat comment, but I want to be sensitive to the schedules. And I've heard some fun things like spouses and partners are coming down saying, what are you drinking? Are you going to have all 3 of those? Give me a
Yeah, right, exactly.
And the answer to that is hell yes.
Hand it over. I know the pressure. Yeah. But would love to hear if anybody would like to share anything in particular. You know, please do. Please feel free. Unmute yourself when you do.
Well, as I mentioned in the chat, it was about 22 years ago now that I was visiting my girlfriend's parents in the East Bay, and they live in Antioch, which, if any of you know Antioch, you're always looking for a reason to get the hell out of there. So I invited all of them up to wine country. We packed up the family truckster and we drove out, and our first stop was Domaine Carneros. And we sat there on the beautiful terrace. We got there at about 2. And if memory serves me correctly, they closed at about 5. And we were there when they closed and reluctant. But as I mentioned in the chat, my wife and I just celebrated our 19th wedding anniversary. So that was one of our first memories. And my parents and my wife's parents live right over there now. So that's a different set of issues that has nothing to do with Domaine Carneros.
Oh,
Are they neighbors of Domaine Carneros?
No, they're neighbors of mine now.
Oh, yes. Oh, well.
They're maybe 100 yards away, maybe. Yeah, so they show up at 7:30 on a Saturday morning. It's a lovely, lovely, lovely.
I want to welcome Steve Maker to the group. Mick's husband. He's been trying the wines along with her, and he had to sit down and hang out. So I'm glad you're here. Nice to see you. Feel free to invite, 4-footers, 2-footers, bipeds are welcome, quadrupeds.
Eileen, I have
Yes.
to say that you totally spoiled me, because one of my first experiences of going to Napa was one of your tastings, and the caviar tasting, and just driving up was such a thrill. So I'd left the corporate world. I worked for DuPont, and all of a sudden I was in this magical world of wine and food, which was so pleasing and so much to learn. And you were a role model from then on to say, this is what a winery needs to be, let alone a sparkling winery, just the hospitality and the flavors and the taste. And I shall always treasure that. Thank you. And good luck. And Remy, good to see you. And hopefully we'll see you soon. Be well.
So Virginia, I often think as I drive to work in the morning, I think I could be on the New Jersey Turnpike instead of the Carneros Highway, and how lucky is that I avoided that. So, and a lot of people, wine and wineries, that's an agricultural business. You're not going to make a fortune in unless you're the proprietor, perhaps. But although there's a story about how do you run a small winery, or how do you succeed with a small winery? You start out with a bigger one, little by little, but it's a way of life, really, winemaking, and it's a fabulous thing. You live in a beautiful area, and people in the industry in general are very friendly, and so it's a great way to spend a lifetime.
Eileen, I wanted to say hi real quick. Chris
Hi.
Sawyer here, representing
Yeah,
the
I know.
Sawyer family, because my phone doesn't work as well as my wife's computer. But happy to be here with everyone and enjoying this celebration of everything that you've accomplished. You are a superhero to me. I have spent, my entire career in the industry following you, being friends with you, drinking fine wines with you. And it's a really special moment for me too. And I think that this 92 vintage is very fitting, because that's about, I got into the industry probably about 94, and with WNT&x magazine and co-brand being a very big sponsor of wine, kind of a conglomerate of such great brands, and how I got to know you through that was so special. And for you and I to become such great friends, and for you to hire Remy, of all people, another great friend of mine who I love so much and who knows Carneros as well as anyone, like the back of her hand. I mean, for those of you that don't know this about Remy, I mean, yes, she was GM, and yes, she was president and these kinds of things. She's a damn good farmer. That girl knows her vineyards. And I think that's why I see nothing but more success for this brand in the future. And I think that really what you did, Eileen, has really made it such a big impression on all of us. And I really appreciate those, the kind of looking back at so many of these wines that you've made through the years, and especially how we've learned so much about aging sparkling wines from you, of all people. And just the fact that, you know, when I throw my little sparkling wine tastings, you always come over and your insight is so great. And I just appreciate you. And I hope you'll come to the next one that I throw, and we'll continue to have fun together.
Those tastings have been fabulous. They're intertwined with California and French champagnes, and it's all blind and it's very fun. But I'm glad that you're near enough that we can visit each other occasionally. So that's really nice. Yes.
So I thought we might want to hear from the person I think the furthest away from us tonight, who's Haley. Haley, are you
yes.
Are you in Texas or are you on the Big Island?
No, I'm in Hawaii. Hi, thank you so much for including me. And I love you both. I love you all so much. And it's so great to see so many faces. I think it's so interesting because I had dinner with Remy like March 4th and then came back to Hawaii and haven't left since. And I'm crazy because our airports are, you know, we still kind of have been in lockdown, but hopefully that is changing now. But I just, you know, Eileen, you have such elegance and such grace, and you make wines that reflect that. You've been so, I just really appreciate everything that we've been able to do together, and you know, the fantastic Dallas Uncorked event that we did that I thought was such a special experience. The caviar tasting, I know. So wonderful. I just am really so happy for you and excited now and want you to come and visit. And now Remy, because Hawaii is a great market for Domaine Carneros, I can't wait for you to come see me over here too. So bravo to you both. I adore you. You're going to be a rock star. Very excited.
You don't have to do much to get us over to Hawaii, either of us.
Texas is a great market. They drink a lot of wine in Texas, but you know, the Hawaii trip's a little bit more fun. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Very sweet. Yeah.
I was wondering, does anybody else, we didn't really talk about the 17 Pinot.
Oh yes.
Let's talk through it, because we talked about the bubs, but I don't want to leave this little beautiful glass of Pinot by itself. Just wondering, hey, hello, I'm here. Okay, it's the end of the day. It's been a long week.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about this Pinot, s'il vous plaît.
Well, I have to give just a little bit of background for this. So, in '92, we were there. A gentleman had actually he's a well-known winemaker at the time, and he planted the vineyards at Domaine Carneros as a consultant. And for a while after, he wanted Pinot Noir grapes from our vineyards, and we would sell them to him. In '92, he wanted far more grapes than we could give up, that we needed them for our own production. And my assistant winemaker at that time had worked at 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿𝐼nger, which was known for their Pinot Noir. And we were going to make a barrel of wine for the employees for the holidays. And 𝐾𝐨𝐳 came through and said, Eileen, what have you got in that barrel? And I said, we made a little red Pinot Noir. And he said, can I taste it? And I said, yes, Mr. 𝐾𝐨𝐳. And he tasted it, and he said, well, when you bottle it, send it over to me in France, and I'll put it in my my hotels and restaurants. And so that's what we did. Of course, the employees who thought they were going to get a big hunk of this Pinot Noir didn't happen, but we've made it up year after year. But it was just by chance, just by interest that we produced this. It was meant to be just a small production. And 𝐾𝐨𝐳 wanted to call it the original wine, the famous gate, because we were the gateway to wine country. In the next year, co-brand asked if we would like to produce a wine for them as well, and that was the estate Pinot Noir that you've got in your glass. And we've honed this over the years with an array of clones and it's never been a big style. We always intended it to be an elegant style in keeping with the style of our sparkling wines. Clearly, they're different wines, very different, but we never wanted to be a big over-the-top Pinot Noir that might have had Syrah added to it or something like that. No, it's just pure Pinot Noir. And we have, with champagne palates, we're happy to drink the Pinot Noirs that we make because they are sort of very refined. And this one is from an array of different clones. We're really into clones. And the 17 I think I've been enjoying it immensely. I bought a case home just a couple of weeks ago. And when I brought it home, my partner saw it and he said, well, it's too early to do that. And I'm not sure. And I said, why don't you try it? And the bottle disappeared pretty quickly. So I think it's just lovely. All those blackberries and cherries and just a whiff of smoke in it. And there's plenty of oak in it, but we don't over oak. And it's its own animal. So hope you're enjoying that.
I would like to say that I checked the When Wine app, and it's a no day. It's a leaf day, and this wine is just so generous and silky and it's beautiful. So bravissimo to TJ, who isn't here. James, if you don't know him, Pinot Noir winemaker.
Plenty of tannins, but they're soft tannins. It's just really, I think to me that's the right amount of oak. It balanced against the classic Carneros Pinot Noir.
There was a question, Eileen, about what's next. Of course, you're consulting, but what else are you going to do? I mean, you've always been a world traveler, and ladies and gentlemen that remain, and I understand that many of you need to get on with your evening, and hopefully some of you can stay with us a little bit longer. But I remember Eileen going to India in the middle of, her break, and she's always, taken time to travel. And she always told me too, when I was a young whippersnapper in New York, that, don't put me on these crazy schedules from like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every night. I need to start my day at a reasonable, civilized hour. 9:30 is fine. And, I like to conclude it around 8. And, she belies her age. We won't say what that is. But
I'll tell you.
No, you don't have to. But, just like the 92 Larev, just holding beautiful. No, but it's I think what's interesting now with COVID and what's happening is a lot of people are discovering how they would like to live, even though we have these stresses. It's more about how we would like to live. And I believe that you have always reflected how you want to live. And I'm really, really madly respectful of that. So the question is, what's next? What's going to happen when you're not helping to consult?
Well, I think it's it'll be different. Of course, we're all figuring out what we're going to do right now. And I always thought when I retire, I'd rent a cottage for 2 weeks in 2 months, not two, and 2 months, and just hang out and, I don't know, Cassis or someplace in southern France. And of course, that's not going to be happening probably in the next year or two. But I live in a beautiful area. I mean, Napa is just beautiful. It's got lots of assets. You don't have to go very far. Great restaurants, great walks. And I'm in several book clubs, and we managed to do that with social distancing, and it's worked very, very well. So I'm on a number of nonprofits, or have been on a number of nonprofits. I expect that I will continue on those. A couple of people have suggested that I write a book. I think if I did, it would be rather irreverent. I'm just gonna start going through that stack of books that I have never quite gotten to, and take a little time just to consider what I'm going to be doing in the future. But I'm figuring out a way right now to get to Hawaii, Haley. So can't give that up. We'll find a way.
Yes. Well, wonderful. Any final sort of words to share? Thank you again for all being here. And one thing I thought should bear a little bit of sharing is Carneros as a region. I think I'd just like to leave you with a little trailer idea, movie trailer. Where Carneros was and where it is now. And I know Remy's extremely excited, and she's in her milieu where she started her career as a viticulturalist. So I think there's a lot to be shared too about the great foundation that you built, Eileen. I remember the day that Carneros became an AVA. We were in a conference room in New York, and you had been very instrumental in making sure that area was designated. And now here we are with Remy and the baton. And, really now, let's be honest, climate change and what does Carneros mean in terms of style and imprint and, future. So something to just sort of tease out a tiny bit. Maybe Remy, you want to make a closing comment about that, and we can all explore this further virtually, in person, when it's safe.
Well, I had a socially distanced lunch with Lee and Christina Hudson the other day, and I said to them, Carneros has never been sexier, and they agreed. So I think between what they're doing and what's happening here with the estate vineyards and Donham and Hyde and so much new energy at 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿𝐵𝐻𝑒𝐻𝑒𝐻 and Arteza, it's an exciting time. A lot of female leadership in the region as well, which is really exciting, as well as just I think a real reinvigoration, a lot of replanting, a real big focus on vineyards and vineyard quality, and also less, as Eileen has mentioned when we've had this conversation before, a little bit less corporate influence in the region and a lot more independent producers. So we're pretty excited about that and getting together with our neighbors and driving this into the future.
Me too.
I just like to mention that Carneros, the appellation of Carneros, the AVA, we are the 10th American appellation AVA, and the company or the winery that got the AVA was Beaulieu. And it was at the behest of 𝐿𝐵𝐻𝑒𝐻. 𝐿𝐵𝐻𝑒𝐻 believed that the best Pinot Noir in California would be produced in the Carneros, and he got the powers that be at Beaulieu to go after the appellation. And he said that the best wine he ever made was a Carneros Pinot Noir. So there's a long history of the recognition of Carneros. Carneros is a small region, and there are far fewer wineries here than there are, for instance, in Russian River or Sonoma Coast. We're smaller, but we're really bracketed by the Petaluma Gap and the San Francisco Bay. So we get a lot of influence, bay influence, water influence, and that keeps, I think that helps prevent issues around global warming, not forever, but it certainly has, we haven't run into real problems with that as yet in the Carneros. We see much more consistent climate that we want rather than something that we're really concerned that we need to move someplace else. So Carneros stands.
I will say one thing real quick on that same subject, and I'm glad you touched on that, Eileen. This year is the 120-year anniversary of Beaulieu Vineyards, and I found it out just by writing an article on it. But I remember it was 20 years ago that I met the great Doug Frost, and it was when we sat next to each other at the Beaulieu 100-year anniversary. We tasted from the 30s to the 40s to the 50s to the 60s to the 70s. Then we broke for lunch, and when we came back, we had 𝐿𝐵𝐻𝑒𝐻's favorite Pinot Noirs from Carneros before we went into the more modern wines. And that, to me, shows so much about his impact and, how all these things connect, especially as far as Napa Valley and the legacy of Napa Valley is concerned. And to be really honest, as a kid, driving through Carneros back in the 70s and pretty much the 70s, in the late 70s, my grandparents would make me count sheep because it was the only thing to make me shut up. And there were a lot of sheep out there. And so I feel like where we go now, if you count the vines out there, you're gonna take your own time doing that, because there are so many great vineyards out there now. I think that the legacy, and especially, you know, that series that I wrote for Wine Business Monthly in 2013 on the 40-year anniversary of Carneros and the 19 appellations that were founded that year on the West Coast, is it continues to evolve. And I think that for sparkling wine, there's never been a better place in the United States than Carneros. And you have been such a critical part of that. And I really want to thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Chris.
I also want to say to Chris, thank you too for hosting every year in December, you know, the what do we call it? The Blanc de Blanc holidays, you know, where you put on
Depends on the, yeah, whatever we want, we'll figure it out. And it is coming up again. So believe me, there will be some invitations coming soon.
Oh,
Thank you, Chris.
I'm really bad at parties ending. I do one of two things. I either stay up or I go to the couch while everybody else has fun. So, but you know, if anybody else has any final closing comments, please do. We've shared. We're going to share the chat, and thank you for all the anecdotes and all your beautiful attention, and thank you for being here. Some of you with dire circumstances, you know, in the Southeast, but thank you. Again, and my toast to these two wonderful women who have really shaped and will shape the future.
Well, and thank you all for being here. It's a wonderful way to get together, and when we can't fly or don't want to fly, but thank you very much for being part of this discussion, a little down memory lane and a deep look to the future. So to all of you, thank you very much for being here.
Cheers.
May your glass always bubble over. Thank you.
Yes, amen. À votre santé. To health. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Au revoir.